it's Sandra Pike from LePage Atlantic and the Pike Group. And today, a topic that is on everybody's mind. Well, not just a topic, I guess there are topics. There's the recession. There are mortgage rates that are going up. And, there's the buzz about what's happening here in the city and what's, going over asking and is it sustainable? So I thought I'd get one of the industries, who has the man who has the finger on the pulse all the time in the news, talking about our market. And Matt, I will let you introduce yourself.
Well, Sandra, thank you. I appreciate it. Those words are very glowing for what I am, but I appreciate it nonetheless. I'm Matt Honsberger, and of course, I'm the president of Royal LePage Atlantic. And yeah, I really enjoy keeping an eye on the market and what's going on out there in the market, so that we can help to inform not only our agents but their customers as well. So love to have this conversation whenever possible.
Awesome. Good. So I have three different topics today that I want to address. And the first thing, of course, was the announcement that came on Friday. 9 new projects. There's going to be affordable housing. And so there's going to be a lot of rentals when I look at, for example, what Clayton is doing over in Dartmouth. Do you see that affecting the housing market? Well, not so much the rental side of things, but will that affect, the low inventory that we've been seeing here?
Yeah, certainly. Obviously, the idea of bringing stuff to market more quickly, which is what I believe they've won. It seems like there's a lot of projects that were kind of already in the works, but had been so delayed that it wasn't sort of a realistic prospect for someone who was looking to sell their house to be able to buy into these areas. But the idea that they're going to come through the approval process more quickly now with a dedicated resource, a dedicated sort of MLA resource to this is, I think, helpful for sure. Now, does it solve anything short term? It absolutely doesn't, because the comment that you would hear from, I guess, the folks at Clayton and others who have had kind of an advantage given here is that they still now have to get the shovels in the ground, and put the shovels in the ground is only the first step on a long journey towards having completed housing ready for people. So, it is a step in the right direction. I think it's a step that our developer community has been looking for some time. But at the end of the day, if you're out there currently searching for a house and finding it difficult to compete for the small amount of existing inventory that's out there, I don't think the pressure is going to be relieved for anywhere short of 24 to 36 months.
So we talked about here at the house this morning, as you know, my other half is in the high-rise development. And he was thinking it wouldn't be till at least up to another 3 years that would actually even impact us here.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think 3 years is sort of the shortest amount of time that it could happen. And we're not talking about small developments here, right? So infrastructure has to get built, roads have to be put in. All of this takes time, and the approval process is only one of the limiting factors to this stuff. There's the availability of trades and availability of material as well, and all of those things are tight as well right now. I know, it's just simply trying to find people who can pour concrete or frame buildings. That, like, there's just not a lot of them around, and so that there is a very big systemic challenge to trying to bring housing to the market quickly.
Yeah, but I am grateful. I'm sure, like many others, are grateful that there will be, that is down the road. It's just not going to, be the resolve that, within, by the end of the year. It just won't happen. But I'm proud of Houston and what he's done, and grateful, where he is leading the ship of the province of Nova Scotia. Yep. So, we talk about the housing crisis that we're having here, and you were around in real estate back in 2012 when we had the ship start here. And, back then properties, if we went 30,000 over asking, it was a huge thing. And, but I remember, I was more of a listing agent a few years after that had happened. And I'm meeting with sellers now in, let's say, 2015. And they were furious that, they either broke even or they lost money of what they purchased in 2012, because again, there was the big hype, I gotta go buy now. And, just recently there was a sale here in Metro. It was a baby split, semi-detached, 500,000. And so we can't knock the buyer why they purchased that. Everybody has a reason why they are spending that money on a home. But how long is that home going to take to acquire equity? Like, that's $500,000 for a baby split.
Yeah, there certainly have been some eye-catching sales that have happened over the last couple of years that have kind of marked different points in what you describe as a housing crisis. And I don't think you're wrong to describe it that way. I think you're right. That was one of them for sure that people looked at. And Sackville typically thought to be a very accessible market for first-time buyers. Now is a point where there's a lot of people who can't afford $500,000. And that the home that you're describing is super entry level. Exactly what you'd be looking at purchasing if you were starting your home ownership journey. And so if the start becomes inaccessible, then it becomes a real big challenge for people who are interested in living in Halifax region to get going on that. So in terms of when that person has equity in their house, every market has tops and bottoms, right? And we know that to be true, whether we're talking about housing, we're talking about, stock markets, you're talking about currencies, oil has been one which I think everyone watches as we go to the pumps every week. At some point, there will be a peak to the market surge that we're seeing right now. And I think that there will be some people who have a very difficult time executing a sale in a quick turnaround kind of fashion. So if you ask me whether the person who just bought a $500,000 semi-detached baby split is able to turn around, excuse me, and make a profit on that quickly, it's hard to say no right now because prices are appreciating so quickly. And what was yesterday's surprise seems like today's kind of just humdrum. Yeah, it's another one of those sold. Yeah. But at some point, someone like that is going to have a difficult time. The market will flatten, and hopefully it's just flatten. It won't come down. And then those people are going to have to be patient with their sale. And so that's going to be something that we'll have to help navigate with people who are, like in your role, you'll have to navigate that with people who are looking to sell their house for reasons that aren't sort of immediately pressing, because they won't be able to sell their house and make any money, and you're going to have to explain that to them, and that's going to be a difficult conversation. So, and
I've had several of them again from, I would say, 3 to 4 years after 2012.
Yep. Yeah, and I would say, like, I don't see. 2012 was a very quick peak and a very, I would say, quick pullback, right? And it wasn't necessarily in price that we saw, but it was just nobody came along to buy houses in 2013 through 2015, right? Yeah. So, anyone who wanted to make any money on their house, there was just no buyers there at all. The sellers didn't really drop their prices a lot. They had to occasionally if they were really forced to move. But what you saw was just a real slowdown in the number of transactions happening. I can see that happening at the top of this market, right? Is that all of a sudden there's just a slowdown in the number of trades happening. What is yet to be determined, because Halifax has almost never seen a big drop in price. And I don't really see an environment coming in the next couple of years anywhere we see a drop in price. I could certainly see a place where we have to level out though.
So should Miss Smith, who lives next door to that particular house, should they too expect $500,000 on their home? Because we all keep saying, oh, that was just an outlier. How many outliers are going to be in Halifax this year? They all can't be outliers.
That's right. Yeah, you see, $1 million houses in Enfield selling, and $500,000, like you say, semi-detached in outlying areas. And one of the really interesting pieces which you and I were chatting about just before we turned on the record here was that the suburbs seem to be catching up with the city, right? Which is an interesting development. The average price in the suburbs now is only $50,000 less than it is in the south end of Halifax, and that to me is a really big change, because there was always this premium put on living downtown that we don't see anymore. So I think we're going to continue to get surprised by prices that we're seeing selling in the suburban areas, whether that's Dartmouth or Sackville, Bedford. Bedford always has been, I guess, a bit of a premium, but the fastest appreciating area in all of HRM over the last 12 months is Harrietsfield, right? Really? So, that area is seeing close to 40% growth in price, and the average price out there is $550. the average price in the West End is only 600. So it's amazing how close those have become all of a sudden.
So would that be single family home, Matt, or that would be like just encompass everything?
Encompass everything, but it's the 12 months trailing, right? We were just talking about it this morning, Mark and I, in the office here, we're talking about it this morning, that, people are going to be shocked when they see what's appreciating the most quickly, and none of it's on the peninsula. In fact, the Halifax Peninsula has 3 of the top 5 slowest areas of appreciation right now. So,
Yes.
the West End, the North End, and the South End are appreciating more slowly than, say, Sackville, Harrietsfield, and the Eastern Shore are. So
would you
it's been right over
say, okay, so but would you say the reason for that is because they were all, I mean, you look at the West End, everybody wanted to be the West End, the South End, and North End. They've had their peak. So
yes.
I was doing a market analysis the other day for a client, and I just went back, the past 7 days, and the average in the North End going over asking was between, I think it was around $53,000 over ask in the North End. And yet you go to Sackville, that I haven't done the stats there in the last 7 days to see what's happening, but they're just catching up with everybody else, which is like good on them, right?
You're exactly right there, Sandra, for sure. That's exactly what's happening, is that there's catch up happening in the suburbs, right? And the beautiful part about HRM is that nobody's more than 20 minutes away from anything they want to get to, right? This isn't Toronto, where the suburbs are, a 2.5 hour commute to Belleville, right? This is still 20 to 30 minutes outside of, every amenity that you need. And so people who are coming to HRM from other provinces are seeing real value in Enfield and real value in Sackville and areas that I think those of us who are sort of native to Halifax would say, geez, that's a long way out, right? But that's not the opinion of those who are coming right now, and they're being more aggressive with those. And that to me is a real kind of interesting development here. And so if we circle back to your Mrs. Smith question, I don't think Mrs. Smith in Sackville should be surprised about that price, because she just all of a sudden is finding herself in an area that the rest of the country has woken up to some pretty good value in, and is taking the ride on that catch up. So
yeah. This is an interesting question. So with the mortgage rates that the Bank of Canada is proposing that they're supposed to go up. So we have these discussions here at home. My thoughts are that I don't know if it's going to affect us here in Halifax or Nova Scotia. And the reason being is that, because when I'm talking to, the buyer, if your budget is 500,000, I already have you looking at $200,000 homes. So we're already buying below budget to get to their budget. So do you think, when the rates do go up, is that going to affect us here?
I'd be surprised if rising interest rates affect the market negatively here. Even 1.5 points, which is kind of what seems to be the prediction over the next 12 to 18 months, still leaves us in a kind of sub 4% market for mortgages. And that to me is still really affordable, right? I don't know a lot of people who are everyone's qualifying at the higher rate. Just that's part of the rules now, right? That's through the mortgage industry. So, the idea that someone's going to get all of a sudden priced out, their purchasing power might go down a little bit. But like you say, you're already shopping in a price range where you're going to have to overpay or overbid, I should say. So it just becomes an adjustment as to what you're looking at, right? And I don't think it slows demand nearly as much as hoped. I also don't think it pushes people to the point where it's completely unaffordable if it's not already unaffordable for them, right? The 1.5 interest rate does not change their ability to buy. I think it just changes what they maybe are looking at. So
would it be someone who has to get refinanced, maybe?
Sure, that's where I think it's going to be interesting. Is we're now probably 2.5, 3 years into what I would call an exceptionally strong market. So anyone who's coming towards the end of a mortgage term that they got on to at 1.79 and is now going to be at 3.4, there's going to be some affordability of their monthly expenses that they're going to have to deal with. On the flip side, those people have taken an awfully big ride in terms of equity appreciation as well. So I think they're going to realize that even though they might have a higher cost of carrying the house, that has still been a wise decision for them because they've seen, probably 6-figure appreciation in whatever they bought 2.5, 3 years ago. So.
Has there been any stats done by the NSAR, of our buyer demographic so far for year to date? Is there anything done like that at all?
One of the interesting things that NSAR kind of tried to introduce a couple of years ago was this buyer path, which I thought was an interesting app, and it kind of got shelved with a little bit of reluctance from the industry members. But ultimately what it did was it showed the point of origin, the place of origin for all the buyers who had come in, right? And it required us all to cooperate and collect that information and then map it. But I think that would have been fascinating information to have our hands on over the last couple of years. We tracked it at the brokerage for a quarter, basically, at the beginning of 2020. And what we saw was that we pulled the comparison period from like 4 years ago, and then we looked at this quarter, the first quarter of 2020. And normally we would have had in this comparison period about 15% of people coming from I would say other provinces to move to here, Halifax, and we were up to 26% of our buyers coming from out of province then. And I would say it's probably even grown again. It's probably a good idea for us to reboot that.
I would love to know that stat because the calls that I'm getting from Ontario, as I told you earlier, I had 13 calls on Wednesday between 4 and 5, and my thoughts are we're getting a lot of interprovincial, from other provinces in Canada coming to here, because even though, we're still in competing offers, we're still not as aggressive as the GTA or what, Ottawa would be, or, those places. So I don't think Alberta has really caught on that much with the aggressive offers this year.
I don't think it'll be interesting to see though, because, $110 a barrel oil all of a sudden makes Alberta an attractive place to go back to live and work. The Suncors of the world are going to start employing more and more people at good wages again to bring them out west, and we'll see if that kind of reboots the oil patch again from a housing perspective. I think it's been the weakest of the provincial markets that have existed out there in Alberta. So you have seen a lot of people from Alberta moving to other parts of the country, but maybe that changes now that there's a little bit more strength in the energy sector.
Yeah, and now, so I haven't seen the stats for this week come out, but looking at the stats from last week, and it seems that the amount of inventory was much higher this time last year, as well were the transactions. Would you say, my thought process, but love to hear what you're thinking. My thought process was because of the new construction that was being listed. Would you say that was the reason why our numbers were inflated last year? And if you look at our numbers now, they're more trending kind of thing where we were? Yeah,
it's a big part of that. No doubt about that. When I was talking to one of our reps who does work with Cresco, one of the bigger builders here, they were talking about how there just is not any inventory available at Cresco right now. They're not putting anything on the market. And so, when you look at them being one of the bigger builders, along with some of the other ones that you guys know, that just is a segment of our market that's completely gone away. If they're bringing them to market, it used to be they'd bring a subdivision to market, and even if only a handful of them were on MLS, you knew there was another 20 to 30 that were available there. And now there's maybe 1 or 2 coming at a time, and that really creates a challenge, because that was a real option for people. They could fix a price on what they were purchasing for the most part, and then they could sell their house for as much as they could sell it for, right? And that was a really real option for people. And that option being gone now really puts a potential seller in a tricky spot where they're really questioning where they're going to go move before they can put their house on the market. And so there's this bit of a log jam there that exists because there isn't that sort of simple guaranteed, here's where I am going to move. It might take me 12 months to figure it out, but at least I can put my house on the market in a comfortable fashion that I'm going to have somewhere to go. So yeah, big part of it, I would say, is that.
Yeah, and I think some of the dealings with builders as well, I know the one that we work with is you don't know what to price the home at. And not because of COVID now, but there are so many fluctuations in the economy, especially now with Ukraine and everything else happening. You don't know where our prices are going to be. So I know our builder very cautious and wants the house to be almost built before they are selling.
100%. Yeah, that's a big change too, that there's no more, pre-construction sales. It's all, let's build it on spec and then take offers on it. And listen, I should say, I feel for the builders on this side as well, right? It would have been very, very difficult to predict that, transportation costs were going to double in the course of a year, right? And all those things that go into building your house get brought here on either railways or in the back of trucks that have seen their fuel costs double. The idea of bringing stuff here to Canada on shipping containers, the cost to get a container through the port has doubled. So it's really hard for a builder in that respect to understand what their costs are, and those guys aren't interested in selling houses at a loss. They just can't do
No,
that.
absolutely not. And I think several of them probably would have done that maybe in 2021, that a lot of them would have, had a lot of difficulty. So the last question, Matt, is, where are you forecasting where we're going to end up here in Metro by the end of the year? Like, I don't see things changing really.
Yeah, I already looked like a dummy in that Royal LePage asked me that at the beginning of the year. And so they do their annual forecast. And we landed on 10% growth this year and in price. And so far we're at close to 30. So probably undershot the mark there on that. But hard to imagine that coming off a year with 20% growth that you would see that actually uptick. I see more inventory coming right now from all of you guys. When I'm talking to you folks in our business, there's more that's coming. So, potentially you see prices level out a little bit. One of the interesting conversations that I witnessed on our little Facebook group that we have as a business as well was a couple of buyers saying, $700,000 to live in Enfield is the same price that it cost me to live in, Newmarket, Ontario. So I'm just going to stay put in Newmarket. And so when there's that there's not that price disparity between Ontario and Nova Scotia, maybe that slows down some of the interprovincial migration. I still think we're the better province to live in, and I grew up in Ontario, so I can comment on both. But that might slow things down a little bit, and you might see some of the prices leveling off. But it's hard to imagine that we're going to see a downtick in price over the next 12 months for sure, because there's just not enough houses available for the amount of demand that's out there. And,
okay, I have one more question. Sorry.
Yeah.
So how we talked about how the outlying communities within HRM, Sackville, like they're getting on the map this year, which is fantastic. Do you see that traveling further out, let's say to Truro, to the Valley, to let's say Bridgewater? Do you see that in a web? Like, will that happen there too, you think?
I do. Certainly up the 102 corridor there, we're seeing that a lot, right? The idea of living in Truro and working in Halifax is not unreasonable to people now. As you go out, some of the other highways there, like the 103, I think there still is a line at Hubbard's, exit 6, that people are starting to say, that's starting to get a little far out. And then it's, okay, am I okay to live on the South Shore and be closer to Bridgewater, for example, there, which is your example there? There's housing developments going on in Bridgewater now, which those people are, people who have lived in Bridgewater for 20 years are shocked to see the scope of some of them. Eastern Shore hasn't seen a lot yet. I think there's still some value there, although for whatever reason that hasn't sort of taken that ride up. And then Sackville through to the Valley, I think that will all soon become one big corridor of housing for people who are coming to live in the city. I know you talk about people who live in New Minas and are working in Halifax, like it's just a reality now. Talking to an agent just last night about a property that is going to go for 6 figures above the list price in the Valley, right? And that's not uncommon anymore, because people are seeing that they've been pushed out of the price here, and they can get a bigger house out there for what they want with their money, I should say.
The sprawl is coming, just like the GTA, right? From Oshawa, Pickering, or was it Oshawa, Ajax, Pickering, exactly. Scarborough. Like the same thing could happen here, right?
It's true. Yeah, it's true. And it'll look a little bit different because there's not the amenities in each of those stops. Like Oshawa still has a Cineplex Odeon, and Pickering has its own. There's not that in Windsor and then Falmouth, for example. But it's still, again, the proximity and the access to the city center is pretty comparable there, right? So 35 minutes from Windsor. I don't know, maybe it's not that if you're going the speed limit, but I'm 35 minutes to Windsor from my house. So, at the end of the day, that's not too unreasonable a drive for a commute for a lot of people.
No, absolutely. Well, Matt, thank you for joining me today. Certainly some great topics for sure.
It's always a pleasure. I appreciate it, Sandra. Thank you.
Thank you.